Wow. Thank you so much for that. I feel like we were just covered with the Word of God, which we were. Thank you so much. All right, let me get organized here. How are you? Are you good? I know you're probably wondering where Francis is and why I'm on this stage. I think he had a flight to catch, so here I am. But I'm so honored to be the last voice you're going to hear at this conference. And I really don't take that lightly, and I have felt the presence of the Lord here. So, would you pray with me before we get started in the Word? I just need to pray. Father, I thank you for this time. I really can't put in words what it's felt like to be in your presence, because there's no words to describe that. Lord, I know that people are thinking about departures and leaving. And Lord, I just pray that right now you would give us just a little bit more, just a little bit more attention, just a little bit more time with you in your word, Lord, to send us off. I just pray that our minds would calm and that any thoughts towards leaving or what we have to do later this day would just go away. And that in these moments we would hear from you refreshed one last time. And I thank you for your presence, Jesus. I thank you, Holy Spirit. Please just move me out of the way and do your thing. We pray in your matchless name, Jesus. Amen. Okay. Well, I was thinking about what happens when you leave a retreat or a conference like this, and I kind of call it a retreat hangover. It's kind of like you're going to go home, and you're on a high from this. Steve called it a mountaintop. It's kind of our mountaintop time while we're here. And then you go home, and I promise you this, and you know this, people that have come back, and you do these kind of things. In 24 hours, you're going to be so irritated by something or someone, probably the person sitting next to you. In 24 hours, there's going to be things going on that you're just like, oh, like take me back to that mountaintop. Take me back to the cocoon. I feel like we're in a cocoon. And honestly, I don't want to leave. Do you? Like, I do not want to leave this cocoon because it's so amazing here. And the presence of the Lord is so strong and so peaceful and so awesome. But we have to go home, don't we? We have to go home. And I wish we could just all live together, but that's not God's intent. We need to get out. And my problem with that is that, when I come to something like this, or I'm soaking in good teaching and worship, I want to change fast. I want to mature quickly. I don't like things to take a long time. I was thinking about my mom. She does not have a microwave. Can you believe that? She still does not have a microwave. And if any of you remember what it was like, I'm sure no one does because I'm positive I'm the oldest person in this room, but to when you had to warm something up on a stove. Does anyone remember that? Maybe growing up. No, none of you guys not growing up. But you had to put it on a stove and warm it up. And she still thinks microwaves are a fad. She doesn't think they're going to stick. And so she still doesn't have one. And it strikes me that living in this culture now, and I know me anyway, I want things fast. I want to be spiritual fast. I want to be mature spiritually fast. And one thing God has shown me, friends, over the decades is that it takes some time. It takes some time to really, really mature with him. And that's fantastic. Till the moment we take our last breath, we're going to be maturing. And Paul even said that himself. He goes, you know what? As much as I know nothing. As much as I know nothing. And so I have been absolutely enthralled over the last year of a lot of my writing and whatnot with this progression of faith in Peter's life. And I told the ladies yesterday, I know Francis and Dawn, they love Paul. I love Paul, but I adore Peter. I absolutely adore him. And the reason I adore him is he's so messed up. I mean, he is a messy man. You know, he's always floundering and making mistakes and speaking when he should be quiet. And he's the one, oh, go, Lord, yes, 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 we're all doing this. And then the one that just falls apart and fails. And I love the progression of faith in his life. So today, I'm going to take you through the progression of Peter's faith. And I'm frankly fascinated by it. Because it's tempting to think that people in the Bible just got it. You know, I mean, they just had an encounter with Jesus and that was it, man. They were just so spiritual, did it all right from the get-go. And that is not true. And if we fall prey to that kind of thinking, we're going to always be beating ourselves up. We're going to beat ourselves up because we're going to feel like we're not making the mark. And it's just not the way it plays out in the Bible. So I want to take you on a little journey with Peter. The first time that we see him, it's really interesting. The first time we see him, Jesus is actually going to his house. And what was happening in this time frame was that in the city Capernaum, Jesus was starting to really minister. And this was at the very beginning of Jesus going public. And so this town of Capernaum, I need to explain it to you a little bit so you get a feel. It was like a little fishing village, you know, and it had a lot of agriculture, but mostly it was fishermen. And it's so weird that Jesus chose that little town. Think like, you know, like let's see, Martha's Vineyard, let's say, only not so rich. Like, think like a town like that. A little fishing village is where Jesus decided to start his ministry. And what's interesting about that is that 5 of the disciples came from that village. Andrew, Peter, James, John, and Matthew. So it doesn't matter where you're from, you know, you can do God's work. It doesn't matter. And he started in this little town, Capernaum. So Jesus was teaching on the synagogue, like on Sabbath. And so Peter was going to listen to him. But that was about it. He would come in, you know, clean up his fishing stuff and go listen to Jesus teach. So one day after Jesus taught, something really crazy happened. I want to read it for you. And if you have your Bibles, you can look at it. This is in Luke chapter 4. Luke chapter 4. And this is the first time we ever see Peter's name mentioned. Okay, so we're in Luke chapter 4, verse 38 and 39. It says this, and Jesus arose and he left the synagogue and he entered Peter's house. Now, Peter's mother-in-law was suffering from a high fever, and they made request of Jesus on her behalf. And standing over her, Jesus rebuked the fever, and it left her, and she immediately arose and waited on them. All right, so what has happened here? Peter is going to church. He's like going into church, but like church isn't going into him. Have you ever done that? Has anybody in this room ever like sat at church and you're just sort of sitting there, but you're not really at a point where anything's coming in? I did that for a long while in my life. A long while. I sat at church, I was there, but I was showing up. Nothing was really happening inside of me though. And this is where Peter had been. He would go to synagogue, he'd listen, he was the good Jewish guy, you know, but nothing was really happening. And on this day, oddly, Jesus comes into his house. And what's weird about it is it doesn't say that Peter asked Jesus, it just says they asked Jesus to come in. So we don't even know if Peter asked, you know what, maybe Peter doesn't even like his mother-in-law. We don't know. We don't even know anything about Peter's wife. She's never mentioned. And I'm dying to know about that. I can't wait to get to heaven to ask Peter about that. Where's his wife in all of this? We know the mother-in-law's alive. We don't know about a wife. So Jesus on this particular day comes into Peter's house and heals his mother-in-law. But you know what, friends? Peter didn't have a love for Jesus. He was probably impressed with him here, but he wasn't in love with him. He was probably kind of amazed that Jesus came in and his mother-in-law's up waiting on them. Wow, that's awesome. But he wasn't in love with Jesus. Not yet. All right? And so here's this progression of faith. Now, I want to show you what happens next. Because after this moment in his house, and that's sort of like his introduction. You know, it's one thing to listen to somebody talk in a church. It's another thing if they come into your house. You know, say you went to the church that Francis is pastor of. You know, you sit in the background, you listen to it. But one day he comes into your house and he's praying over your family or a family member. That's a different story. Now there's a little bit of intimacy. Now, so what happens next? Jesus is basically on his own. He doesn't have disciples around him. He doesn't have a posse around him, which he will soon. But look at what happens in chapter 5. This is so great. Okay, so chapter 5, verses 1 through 3. Now, it came about that while the multitude were pressing around Jesus and listening to the word of God, that Jesus was standing on the shore of the lake of Gennesaret. And he saw 2 boats lying at the edge of the lake, but the fishermen had gotten out of them and were washing their nets. And he got into one of the boats, which was Simon's, and asked him to put out a little way from the land. And he sat down and began teaching the multitudes from the boat. All right, so what's happening here? Now, picture this. Jesus is on the shore of the water, and multitudes are coming in to hear him. He is preaching it. I mean, it is awesome. He's talking and speaking into their lives. More and more people are coming. But where's our boy Peter? Is he sitting right there front and center listening to Jesus? No. Where's Peter? He's washing his nets. He's not even there listening to Jesus. He's over washing his nets. He's taking care of his business. That fascinates me. I always pictured him just like right there to Jesus. He's not. He's not. Now, Jesus does something so brilliant, as he's so known to do. He goes and gets whose boat? Peter's. Peter's, because the crowd's coming in on him. He's probably like inching back into the water, like, whoa, 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 they're getting closer, closer. And very intentionally, he goes and he gets Peter's boat. And he goes and he asks Peter, you know what, will you push this out a little bit? Because, you know, the crowd's kind of pressing in. Peter probably was like, okay, yeah, you know, he's washing his nets. All right, sure, I'll do that for you. You know, comes over. And I honestly think Peter jumped in the boat with Jesus, not necessarily to hear Jesus, but probably to protect his property. Because think about it, everything that he depended on in his livelihood is that boat. Everything. So he gets in the boat. Some scholars think maybe he was still sitting on the shore. I personally just want to picture him in that boat with Jesus. And now guess what? He can't go anywhere or be distracted from Jesus. Jesus has got him right there in that boat. And he's listening to Jesus now, uninterrupted. All right, but here's the crazy thing. He's still not in love with Jesus. He's still not in love with him, and here's how I know. Watch this. Look at verses 4 through 5. When Jesus finished speaking, he said to Peter, now put out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch. And Simon answered and said, Master, we worked hard all night and caught nothing, but because you've asked, I'll let down the nets. Okay, you know what, friends? The fact that Peter calls Jesus master here says a lot. Back in this day, master was another just word for mister. Matter of fact, my grandfather used to write letters pretty much his entire life, and he would still sign them to master so-and-so. We don't use that term now, but back then, that was just another way of saying mister. So picture that Peter says to Jesus, well, mister, you know, I already went out there. I've already tried that water. I know there's nothing there. But because you said to, just sort of like out of respect, I'll do it. So he's doing this just out of respect, not because he loves Jesus. He's listening to him just because, you know what, a lot of people listen to this guy. I've heard him at the synagogue. Okay. All right. And I can tell you honestly, I'm sure you feel the same way. I respect a lot of people that I don't love. I respect a lot of people I don't even really like, you know? But he's just simply doing it as sort of like a token. So, watch what happens. Oh, this is where it gets so good. All right. So, verse 6. And when they had done this, they enclosed a great quantity of fish, and their nets began to break, and they signaled to their partners in the other boat for them to come and help them, and they came, and they filled both of the boats so that they began to sink. But when Simon Peter saw that, he fell down at Jesus' feet, saying, "Depart from me, for I'm a sinful man, O Lord." For amazement had seized him and all his companions because of the catch of fish which they had taken. And Jesus said to Simon, "Do not fear. From now on, you're going to be catching men." And when they had brought their boats to the land, they left everything and followed him. They left everything and followed him. Now, this is so mind-bending to me because think about it. Peter has watched Jesus heal. He's heard amazing teaching. And none of that changed him. What changed him? Fish. Fish changed Peter. Why did that change him? Because you know why? Jesus met him at the place of his greatest need, his greatest passion, probably what kept him up at night. Am I going to make a living? Am I going to have enough? Jesus met him at the place that he needed help most. Fish. Fish brought him to his face before the Lord. "Oh, Lord," notice he's not calling him master anymore. "Oh, Lord, I'm a simple man. Get away from me because I am just that bad." It was fish that brought him to this point. And you know what, friends? I want to ask you this question. What is your fish today? You know, what is that thing in you that keeps you up at night? What is that part of you that you may feel pressure? I think for most of us in this room, it's baseball. You know, Bobby and I don't have a job right now, and there's like that pressure. You don't know where you're going to be, what you're going to do, how it's going to turn out. For you ladies, what is the fish in your life? Where is that place that you need Jesus to show up? And that's the place he's going to give you the biggest catch. He's going to show up so boldly and so powerfully that you know without a doubt that nobody could have done that but him. That's your fish. And I remember the first time I ever saw Jesus bring fish into my life. And ladies, I know you've heard me tell this story over these couple of days, but for the men's sake, I was raised in a horrible house. And I'm talking about horrible. And my dad was the youngest bank president in Colorado. He was 33 years old, very charismatic, very handsome, just walked into a room and everybody noticed him. That's the kind of man he was. And my mom was from Maryland and just a very beautiful woman, and he had married her there and brought her to Colorado to start a life. Well, their marriage stunk, you know, and he would be gone for whole weekends and not come back and yada, yada. And so their marriage was awful. And one night, my mom went up to his bank because there was a party there that she had not been invited to, and she found him in the car outside the bank with a 19-year-old girl. And so that night she told him their marriage was over. And as he was driving on the hilly roads between Boulder and Denver, that night his car went off the road. And it rolled and it rolled and it rolled. And at 5 a.m, a milkman found him strewn over the front and back seat, paralyzed from the neck down. So now my mom is in the role of, loving wife at the bedside of a dying husband, knowing what she saw the night before. And she turned to vodka. She was a mess. She was absolutely a wicked, violent alcoholic from that time on. So I raised my little brother and sister. I was 9 at the time. They were 6 and 3. And by the time I went to college, I was just like, see you. I am out of here. Done. Over. And I got to college and I noticed that I had all this pain inside, and I started to eat, and I ate and I ate and I ate and I ate and I ate. And I didn't know what to do with that binging. And then I starved and I starved and I starved and I starved. And on the verge of taking my life one day, I just said, Jesus, who are you? If you're real, show yourself to me. Change me. Is there anything in me you can do? Can you use me? I want to die. And I wish I could say I was healed of all my food issues instantly, but you know what? Never after that day was that hole, was that wound so large and so big. It immediately filled up with the love of Jesus. And nothing was the same. Shortly in that same time period, Bobby, because we had been dating and I was dating a baseball star, gosh, I didn't want to tell him anything that was going on in my life, especially that I was struggling with food issues. And I called him that day that I prayed that prayer to Jesus, and I said, Bobby, can you come over? And he gets in a car, rushes over. He thinks I'm going to break up with him. And he walks in the door, and I'm like, I prayed to Jesus. And he's like, that's it? I thought this was a big deal. Well, it was a big deal. Little did he know. He went off to play his first year of pro ball and went to a baseball chapel Bible study. A baseball chapel Bible study changed everything for him. It was his fish. You know what, friends? Food was my fish. It was the first time I saw Jesus move in my life. It was the first time I knew that he was real and that he had a catch that was so wild and crazy for me. But I want to get back to Peter because you know what? It's tempting to think, well, great. He gets it now. He's left everything to follow Jesus. So great. Everything's good. But you know what? Intimacy with Jesus, listen to this really carefully. Intimacy with Jesus does not mean perfection. Just because we're intimate with him and we love him, it does not mean we're going to be perfect in our behavior towards him. Because I want to show you something in Peter. It's the most devastating moment of his life, and I'm sure you've heard it. It's when he has sworn to Jesus, when Jesus knows he's going to the cross, I will defend you, I will die for you, I'm your man. And no sooner does he say that, within that same 24-hour period, he's saying he doesn't know him. I want to read this for you. It's so devastating. It's in Matthew. And we're going to look at chapter 26, 69 through 75. Now, Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard, and a certain servant girl came to him and said, you were with Jesus, that Galilean. But he denied it before them all, saying, I don't know what you're talking about. And when he had gone out to the gateway, another servant girl saw him and said to those who were there, this man was with Jesus of Nazareth. And he again denied it by swearing, I don't know the man. And a little later, the bystanders came up and said to Peter, surely you too are one of them, for the way you talk gives you away. Then, this is what kills me, he began to curse and swear. I don't know that man. And immediately a cock crowed, and Peter remembered the word which Jesus had said, before a cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and he wept bitterly. Oh, this is Peter, a guy that spent day in, day out with Jesus, saw him heal multitudes, saw him make food from nothing, saw him transfigure on a mountaintop. And here, 24 hours after saying, I'll do anything to protect you, I'm your man, he's going, I don't know him. And here's the sad thing of this. You know what is weird about this? It was servant girls, maids, and bystanders that he was trying to please in that moment. It wasn't even like the Sanhedrin, or a court that he's having to talk to. It's like little servant people. that he denies Jesus to. And the part that kills me is he's cursing and swearing by the end of it. Have you ever found yourself in behavior that was like sort of pre-Jesus? And you just like go, why did I say that? Why did I act like that? Why am I behaving like that? Why didn't I stand up for Jesus? Why was I silent? Or why did I speak like that? I mean, I have been there before, and it is a devastating place to be. It's awful. It's so bad that Peter, I picture him running away from this moment and probably holding himself up in some upper room and bawling for like a week. Because if you think about it, notice who wasn't at the cross. Peter was not at the cross. John was at the cross. Arguably, Peter, or Jesus' best friends, John and Peter. Peter wasn't at the cross. You know what? I think he's still crying in a room. I let you down, Lord God. How can I ever show myself again? Am I usable? Am I workable? Am I going to be of value to you ever? And not even that, just the fact that you let the Lord down, it stinks. It's awful. And so what happens later, we're not going to look at it, but Jesus meets them at a beach, and he makes breakfast for them. And it's Peter. He's the one out in the fishing boat, and he sees Jesus on the beach. He recognizes that it's him. He throws himself in the water, splashing to get to Jesus, runs to him. The rest of the disciples get there on dry in their boat, calm and cool, not Peter. And Jesus restores him 3 times for the 3 times that he's denied him. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Feed my sheep. Feed my sheep. He restores him. But you know what I love about Peter? And this is what I really want to lay over all of our lives, friends, because we're going to leave here on a mountaintop, and we're going to go home, and we're going to let him down sometimes. We're going to let him down sometimes, but I want you to watch Peter, because what he ended up doing was becoming the first pastor of the church. It wasn't Paul. Paul wasn't even saved yet. It was Peter. And do you know, just shortly, a few weeks after all of this happened, a few weeks after he said, I don't know him, he preached a message, and 3,000 people were saved. 3,000 souls came to Christ. The very first message he preached. But what strikes me is this. I want to read this line in Acts to you. Oh, I love it. It's Acts 4:13, just one little verse. It's so fantastic. The people in the new church and around that area were watching what was happening with these Christians, these Christ followers. And this is how they described Peter. Now, as they observed the confidence of Peter and John and understood that they were uneducated and untrained men, they were marveling and began to recognize them as having been with Jesus. They began to recognize them as having been with Jesus. How would you like it if a teammate described you as, man, I love that guy. He has been with Jesus. Or that woman, that wife, I'm telling you what, I came to that city, I didn't know a soul. That woman loved me. She has been with Jesus. Is that not the best description you could ever have behind your name? She has been with Jesus. He has been with Jesus. And when I read that for the first time, it was early this summer, I was like, I've read it before, but for some reason it has just stuck with me. Been with Jesus, been with Jesus. And I said to the Lord, Father, can you show me what that looks like? Can you show it to me? And friends, I want to share with you just sort of a closing story that has absolutely wrecked me. It has absolutely wrecked me because I have seen a person that has been with Jesus. This summer, I had the pleasure of taking 8 women back to Africa with me, and I know we're talking a lot about Africa. You don't have to go to Africa to have a holy experience. Believe me, most of my holiest experiences have happened in ballparks. But it was my second time going, and a friend of mine had started this orphanage there, and a young girl. And so I had gone the first time just as a reading consultant to train the teachers at the orphanage school in some things around reading comprehension. And while I was there the first time, I got asked by a pastor to come back and speak, because he said, you know what, we have all these women, and we have no one to teach them. So seriously, when he was asking me to come, I'm like, sure. But in my head, I'm like, no. It was so hard. It was a really hard trip on so many levels. But so a year passed, and I started praying, Lord, am I supposed to go back? And as God would have it, yes, you are. And so I got this team of women together. And let me tell you, the first time I gathered them at my house to start preparing, they were like, well, so the hotels we stay in, is there going to be a safe in the hotels? Like a safe? We're going to be lucky if there's running water or electricity. You know, I was trying to prepare them for what it would be like, and it was just, there's no preparing for that. And so we get ready to go, and the day we leave, it's pouring rain. And so a little 18-year-old that was on our team, she took my backpack, and it had all my stuff in it, my visa, my passport, money. And she lifts it up to me in the rain, and she's like, Gary, do you want this in the back of the van? No. I said, put it in the front. Well, you know what? She left it on the front porch. So we get all the way to the airport. I've got my team. We're kind of hustling in. I'm trying to get them going. It's a 2-day trip to get there. And I realized that my backpack is not with me. And obviously, I can't go. I have none of my documents, nothing. So I send them off. One of my teammates is bawling. She's never traveled past, probably out of Texas, and I'm sending her halfway around the world. She's crying at the ticket counter. The 18-year-old is crying. Another team member is crying. And I'm like, listen, you guys, here's me, Miss Rally Girl. If this is the worst Satan does to us, bring it. That's why I say, bring it. I will never utter those words again, let me just say. I said, I'll meet you. We're going to start at the orphanage. And then we were going to this place where I was going to be speaking called the Miracle Crusade. It was at a different location, but we were going to do a few days at the orphanage first. So off they go. And the next day I leave, and I'm going to meet them, at the orphanage. And that was safe. At least it wasn't the speaking that was going to get missed. And so I'm going on literally, I think at this point, 2 or 3 nights of no sleep. And I'm talking about like none. No wink of an eye sleep, nothing. And the first night I get there to the orphanage, I had another night of no sleep. And so I stayed up all night. I was going to be preaching their church service on Sunday and then leading a study for all the people that worked at the orphanage that night. So I just studied, and I'm like, okay, why sleep at this point? About 5 o'clock, I look at my alarm, and I know it's set for 6 to get up and get out for the church service. I thought I'll sleep for an hour. Well, I had my mosquito net around me during the night, but for some reason in that 1 hour that I decided to sleep, I didn't have it around me. And I overslept on my alarm, and when I woke up and threw clothes on, I didn't really look at my face. But later that night, I look in the mirror, and a spider had marched across my face and bit me 21 times. 21 times, some type of spider had bitten me all over my face. Well, at this point, I'm like, bring it. I'm like, it's starting to kind of hurt, that bring it. I just went, oh my gosh. And so the next day we left to get ready to go to where this crusade was. We had a day in between where we stayed at this bed and breakfast that a man houses for Christian ministries. And so we were sitting there, and all of a sudden that night, we come in from dinner, and there's like wild monkeys and wild animals. Woo, 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 woo. It's just like crazy noises, wolves and screeches. And you could just feel this fear rising. It was weird. It was like kind of this satanic feel as we pulled back into where this housing was. And I get a knock on my door from several of my teammates, and they come in my room, and they're like, Gary, we can't go. There's too much. It's too dangerous. We don't know enough. We don't know what we're doing. We have such a sense of terror. We can't do this. And we sat and we prayed. I said, listen, we are not going to operate out of fear. We're going to operate out of faith. And here I am, bites all over my face, and I look like a mess. And my singer that I brought, she's black, and she gave me her concealer. And so I was like trying to cover up all these bites. And I mean, we're just like all a mess. But we prayed and we prayed and we prayed that night. And the next day we drove off into Oblivia. Bobby and the Houston Astro coaches got on Google Earth and they tried to find out where we were going for this crusade. And when they found the location, they gasped. In the locker room, they just gasped. They were like, Meach, she's in the middle of nowhere. And he was like, yeah. I mean, we were in a no-go zone later, we find out, for Americans, bordering right up on the Congo border. It was a no-go zone. And so we get to this crusade, and that night we were supposed to speak the next day, and that night I'm laying in bed, and I'm praying and I'm praising. I'm going on night 5 of no sleep. Night 5. All of a sudden I start feeling something well in me, and I'm like, I'm sick. I go into the bathroom, and I'm hung over the toilet all night long, like sicker than a dog. And I said to the Lord, what am I going to do? I'm supposed to preach in the morning. This is our first day here. And all night I kept hearing, power is perfected in weakness. Power is perfected in weakness. Somehow that day I crawled out of bed and got in the shower. If I had been home, I'd been at an urgent care with an IV hooked up. That's how sick I was. I crawl out of bed. I throw some clothes on, and I went. And friends, I was able to preach by the grace of God, not once, but 3 times that day. Barely could stand up. But as I looked out over these people that stood in the sun for like 9 hours, hot sun, not covered in shade, to hear the word of God. And every time we'd come upon something that was good or the name of Jesus, they would break into applause. Jesus. They were hanging off of trees and coming out of cornfields. And I just looked out and I was like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. But the moment that was the holiest was yet to happen. One of the timid, sweet little pastors said, I want to take you to Prayer Mountain. I'm like, Prayer Mountain, that sounds kind of cool. Sure, you know. And we packed all of our team in this van and cars, really, and we rode up this mountain. And on the way to the mountain, I asked him, I said, well, how did you start this? What is this? And he said, in 2004, Jesus appeared to me and said, you need to start this place. It's going to be a place where people come and they hear from me. And let me tell you, friends, people in Africa, like, they hear from Jesus because they're not distracted by a million things. Like this little old pastor, I know that he heard from Jesus. And when we got out of this van, these beautiful caramel-colored girls came to meet us, and they had been down at the crusade in the day, and they fell down at our feet. They fell down at our feet, and they were like, thank you for coming here. Thank you for coming here. And I was just trying to raise them up. No. No. We're the ones that are honored. And we walked into this little mud church, and I mean, it was probably built to hold 15 people. And we walk into this church, and it was so holy, you could not even hardly speak. You couldn't talk over this. It was so holy, and we sat on the benches in there, and one of the pastors spoke. He was normally loud and gregarious. He was like this, talking like this. It was so holy. And one of the little caramel-colored girls, she stands up because he had said, does anyone have anything they want to say? And friends, she stands up, and in her hands is a live chicken. A live chicken. And we're just looking at that like, what the heck? And she stands up in the most holy voice. She says, I want to offer this to the singer of this group. Her music absolutely spoke to me, she says. And she said, I want to give this to the singer. And she walks back. I can barely get it out because it was so holy. For a split second, we kind of wanted to laugh because if you knew the singer in our group, she was like diva girl. She doesn't like ants. She doesn't like grasshoppers. And now this girl is offering her a live chicken. And she walks over to her and she kneels down beside her and she puts it in her lap. And the singer is just like bawling. And all of a sudden, I could barely even hold my head up. It was the holiest moment I've ever experienced. We were just on our faces, just like bawling to the Lord. Every one of us, men and women, bawling and bawling. And you know why? Because this woman gave everything. In that culture, if you have a chicken, you're rich. Because you're going to have eggs, you're going to have food, you're going to have sustenance. And it was everything. She owned this chicken. And she takes it and she gives it to the singer who had blessed her that day and who had brought her into the presence of the Lord. It was such a holy moment. And I've never been the same from seeing that moment where she gave everything to the Lord. And this is what I want us to think about, friends. What is your chicken? What is your chicken? Because Jesus will meet you at your fish. But what's your chicken? See, he just wants everything. And he's not after perfection. He knows that we're going to let him down. He knows there's going to be times we're mad at ourselves or we wish we could have done better. It's okay. It's okay. He just wants your chicken. So I'd love to just close us in prayer now as we leave this place. I believe a holy place. Would you please pray with me? Father, I thank you for this time. I thank you for what you've done in hearts, in lives, in marriages. You say, Lord, that you are a God of hope. And I just pray that we would leave with such hope, Lord God, that we would offer you everything that we are. And that we would just live in that. That's enough. We don't have to perform for you. You're already pleased. We just have to love you with abandon. And that's enough. Lord God, I just pray for all my precious brothers and sisters as we leave this place, Lord. Will you knit our hearts together in love, that even though we're not sitting in a room with one another, we are praying for one another. We are lifting each other up. And Lord God, be glorified in the lives in this room. Be glorified, celebrate over the lives in this room. We give you our everything. In your matchless name, Jesus, we pray. Amen.